So I was definitely a kid who spent a ton of time at the gym, not a lot else to do. And I mean, some of my favorite memories growing up was riding my bike to the gym and just playing pickup basketball. That's where I really learned to love the game.
It's a long way from Pinckneyville, Illinois, where Julie Roe Lach fell in love with the game of basketball. Now she's leading a Division I athletic conference. The Indianapolis-based Horizon League commissioner on growing up in a small town, her days as an All-America student athlete, now leading in the chaotic world of intercollegiate athletics. Julie Roe Lach, my guest this week on the Business and Beyond podcast. Julie Roe Lach never shied away from a challenge. Growing up in a small coal mining and farming community in southern Illinois, she learned teamwork at an early age.
Just like a team, you've got the point guard, the forward, the shooting guard. You all bring different talents, and that becomes extraordinary. In a work setting, you've got your communications, your PR, your legal. Like, how do you bring all that together to be extraordinary? So I really viewed it as a leadership lab that just translates. I mean, I think it's unlimited, the lessons you learn in sports and how you can take that with you.
She's taken those life lessons from sports to become a trailblazer for women in the competitive world of college athletics as a leader of the Indianapolis-based Horizon League. And I am very pleased to be joined by the commissioner of the Indianapolis-based Horizon League, Julie Roe Lach. Julie, thanks very much for joining me.
Thank you, Gary. It's great to be with you. Happy May.
Well, yeah, happy May to you. This is a great month to be in Indianapolis, to be sure. How about as the commissioner of the Horizon League? I mean, do you ever have really a downtime? You know, basketball, very high-profile sport, but you got a lot of other sports to contend with as well.
We do have a downtime. I can tell you it's not now. I'd say July is a time to not just catch our breath, but importantly, plan for the next year. So at this time of year, it's exciting because our staff hosts 19 championships. Some are on our campuses, some are at predetermined destinations, and we're right now in the midst of our spring championships. So we held golf actually down in Florida with the Orlando Sports Commission, and we just take over a resort. It's fun to have all of our men's and women's teams come over. And then we just hosted our tennis championship actually up the road at Purdue. They have a tremendous complex. And then we are moving to Oakland in Detroit suburbs this weekend for our outdoor track championship. And then softball and baseball will be on the campus of our number one seed regular season champion. And that's to be determined because they're still playing.
You mentioned Oakland and what a run they had in basketball. Talk about what that experience was like, because, lots of folks, myself included, were really rooting for them in the tournament.
It was, I said, it's not for us. It wasn't March Madness. It was March Magic.
Yeah.
and I was very grateful to be a part of that journey. And I've known, it does usually start with the leadership. And in this case, President Pescovitz, Dr. Ora Pescovitz, spent much of her career here in Indianapolis. She's the president of Oakland. Athletics director Steve Waterfield has been there for a number of years. But the real story and where the media naturally gravitated was deservingly right on the head coach, who's been coaching for 40 years. Greg Campy, quite a story. And he and I, as with any passionate coach, we're going to agree to disagree on some matters, but I know, and I've always known that his heart's in the right place. And I've always appreciated that behind closed doors in coaches' rooms, and then obviously very publicly in the way he recruits and develops his players. So to see that team that was loaded with seniors, some grad transfers, some fifth-year seniors now because of the pandemic, the bonus year, it was really neat to see the way they all came together and believed and then executed the game plan. And yes, it was an upset for the viewers, and my phone blowing up at the time, being there, watching the game along with Oakland's leadership. But on the other hand, when you spend as much time with them as I was able to, it wasn't as much of a shock. They came to play.
What does that kind of a run do for the Horizon League? And I think March Madness tends to put a spotlight on the level of play in conference, in mid-major conferences that many people maybe don't appreciate until they see it and they say, well, they can play.
Yeah, exactly. And I'll tell you, we've, as a league, obviously basketball, men's and women's, that's our primary sport and really our showcase sport. And our presidents have gotten behind that. We've had now a 4-year strategy on how do we achieve and sustain national competitive excellence in basketball. We just had our head coaches here in this office a couple weeks ago, and Greg Campy said to our coaches, look, on the night we played Kentucky, we were just as good as them. And then 2 nights later, when we played NC State, took them to overtime, we were just as good as them. It wasn't a fluke. And this year in the Horizon League, 7 of you, as he's looking around the room, because we had 8 teams really vying towards down to the end for the championship, 7 of you were just as good as us. We can absolutely compete at this level. This isn't a once in a decade Cinderella founder slipper opportunity. This is let's continue to get after it and get after it together, which, hats off to him for sharing that moment with our coaches. But he said, you guys helped us be ready for that because we were battle tested. We played good competition, to your point, Gary, throughout the season. They also tested themselves with some key games in the non-league, played Xavier, played some others where they knew what that means to be sometimes in a hostile situation. But I think to his point is we've got great basketball in this league.
Yeah.
And it was a league win. So to your point, that's what it means.
How do you win though? How do you sustain that level of play in the NIL era? I mean, I think about, the example that comes to my mind is Indiana State in the Missouri Valley Conference. And they had a tremendous run, tremendous season, the opportunity to really turn that program around. And they lose literally their coach and the entire team essentially to NIL. How do you compete? How does that work?
Well, it is tough, and it's not just NIL. Like the landscape that we are all navigating now in Division I, it is NIL, and it's also increased mobility because now the transfer rules have been relaxed. As long as you're academically eligible, you can transfer as many times as you want, which I support philosophically. My concern is we know that the more times a student athlete transfers, the less likely he or she is to graduate, because obviously you don't have as many. It's not as a clean transfer of credits every time, right? So that degree does matter, especially from the majority of student athletes. But at any rate, it is hard. And what we're seeing is, and I keep reminding our coaches of this, it's a two-way street because we've had a lot of talent transfer to our league because they go chase the NIL money and then they don't get playing time. And we've had that happen. And we understand it's not that we don't blame them or judge them for accepting some pretty lucrative NIL opportunities. But on the other hand, they still want to play and they still want to compete. And we give them a platform where they are competing on ESPN. They are competing on TV. They are competing in front of great crowds that care about them. So if they do come to our league, they're going to get that opportunity. It's not going to be as many zeros because that's just the reality we're living in. But I will say, we know, and I've talked with our presidents and ADs about this, you do have to have a collective. And that is where the significant NIL money is happening, obviously. I mean, I can talk about what the Horizon League's done because we've created a platform for, now we have 1,000 of our student athletes who have taken advantage of NIL deals through Open Doors. It's a platform and we've done over $800,000 worth of transactions. None of that money is coming to our league office, by the way. It's strictly A to B. Like Dunkin' Donuts has hired some of our women's basketball student athletes to promote their favorite latte. That's happening through this platform we've set up. Now that those deals are not recruiting or retaining our basketball student athletes. Though that's happening through these collectives.
You talk about the portal and so many of these students transferring. It doesn't get much attention, but I think there's maybe a significant number of players who do that, as you suggest. They transfer and then they don't get the playing time. And
That's right.
and the negative effects, if the high profile players obviously get all the attention and fanfare, but how about for those student athletes who look for the grass being greener and then find out it's really not?
Right. The money might be greener, but that's it.
Yeah.
And that we had a fantastic student athlete. He was first team all league a couple of years ago at Wright State. Because of his success, he was recruited by Ohio State. transferred there, maybe got 10 minutes a game. And obviously, I'm sure there was some significant NIL activity happening, but wasn't happy.
Yeah.
And it wasn't a comment on Ohio State, just not happy because he's a competitor and he's a really good competitor and he wanted to play more. And also he missed his coach and that support system that wrapped their arms around him at Wright State. So he transferred back and he started this past year at Wright State. And as he said, it's like coming home. So that's why I say it's not just a two-way street of the boomerang effect. It's more of there are student athletes who recognize they might enjoy the profile of being at now a Power 4 school or the Big East, but that doesn't always equate to playing time.
Yeah. Talk a little bit more about how you and the Horizon League really addressed NIL, because I remember having a brief conversation, I think, with you some time ago, and you really took a holistic look at how to put this platform together. How did you do it, and what did you come up with?
Well, we thought there were really two needs, and there wasn't an obvious solution out there. One was just education, like how do our student athletes build a brand? And it's not like there's a social media 101 class, but that's essentially what we were looking for is how do you build a persona that's authentic, but that also resonates so that companies want to hire you to endorse their products. And it doesn't have to be for the Caitlin Clark $28 million deal. We're just talking being able to make a few $1,000s. So we interviewed several, there's lots, as you would imagine, the cottage industry has really popped up there. So there's several vendors in that space. We interviewed them, and I really liked Open Doors because they had 1-2 minute hits that were good intelligence, good education that student athletes could digest as they wanted. Then the second part of that just didn't exist, and I talked with Open Doors about how do we build it. They were pushing school sites so that all of Oakland student athletes would be at one destination, and brands could go on and say, I'm going to hire Jack Golke. And you can still do that. But I said, what if we leverage the collective, if you will, of the Horizon League, and then bring the potential power of 3,000 student athletes to one destination? So now it requires the student athletes go in and set up their profiles, but we've had over 1,000 do that. And then brands can go on and sort by major, location, hometown, sport, and hire them. And we're a year and a half in now, well, almost 2 years come June. And we've done just over $800,000 worth of transactions. Our student athletes have, just by us creating the space. And I'll say back to Oakland, because we had that platform in place, I'm literally sitting in the hotel, like outside the ballroom where Oakland was having their scouting report as I'm walking through. And I see Jack Golke and Trey Townsend doing videos to promote products that they had been hired after the Kentucky win, before the NC State game. And it was legit NIL deals that they were able to transact through this platform that we had set up along with Oakland. So that was pretty satisfying to see it actually happening in real time. And they were capitalizing on the moment as they deserve to.
Yeah, that's great. I have another NIL question, but you mentioned Caitlin Clark, and I have to get your take on the impact. A lot's been said about what it will mean to the WNBA, to Indianapolis for having her on the Fever. But and you've got daughters. What's the impact in your view of the visibility and the attention, the way she carries herself on and off the court? What that means to grassroots women's basketball and the future of the game?
I don't think I could exaggerate this, and it's easy to want to. It's transformational. I say that the Fever have gotten a ticket to a rocket ship, and we all have the ability to ride along. Like it is, and I've heard somebody say the other day, this isn't just a moment; we are part of a movement.
Yeah.
And I was at the Women's Final Four 2 years ago. And I was at the men's in Houston, and I drove up to Dallas for the women's champ game. And just upon arrival, the red carpet arrivals, watching the teams, I knew something was different. And I could feel it in the air. I've been going to women's Final Fours for 20 years, and I just said, this is different. Ironically, I bump into Dr. Allison Barber, president of the Fever, in the concourse. She's just there to support women's basketball. She has no idea she's going to be drafting Caitlin Clark in a year plus, right? And she could feel it. Like we were just talking about, wow, this energy is amazing. Fast forward to this entire season, Caitlin Clark setting all these records, obviously for regular season attendance, viewership. And then Of course, I was at the women's Final Four this year. It was just electric.
Yeah.
And to see it and experience it firsthand, as you said, I have two daughters, they play basketball. So I've been asked to get a Caitlin Clark signed jersey, I think, every day for the last, since they drafted her. I said, that's not as easy as you think it is, kid. But it is really the opportunity here to, I mean, we've seen it, the viewership of women's sports, and we saw that with the championship game at what was the final number, eclipsed the men's by several million, because we have so many viewers now watching the game in a different way. And yes, part of it is the Caitlin Clark effect. I also have seen it, the game itself. I mean, the South Carolina lineup, we still have, I just saw Dawn Staley, she was here in Indianapolis on an NCAA inclusion forum just last week, and she talked about, yeah, Caitlin's now going to the league, and we're going to see the impact there. College basketball now on the women's side has to continue to rise, and they will, because we've got all these Juju, Paige, we have all these now stars that are frankly have more brand recognition than the men.
Yeah, that's great. Back to the NIL, and I'll ask you to kind of look into the crystal ball, which is impossible to do, I know, but where do you see it going? Transfer portal, NIL, so much talk on the national level, guardrails have to be put in place, this, that, and the other. Others believe, the toothpaste is out of the tube. How do you change things? What do you see happening here in the coming months?
Well, and even just in the last 24 hours, there's been news, and I've read it. I don't have an inside scoop, even though I'm a commissioner, that there are negotiations happening in the House case. And the House case, I'll just take 15 seconds on it if people are tracking. It's a class action case. It's House and Oliver, two student athletes that are now representing a class of Division I football, men's, women's basketball, suing the NCAA and the power conferences for back pay and NIL. So it's essentially, thank you for deregulating, but now you need to pay us for the years that we couldn't take advantage of it. Looking backwards, I think it's like 4 years. That does affect the Horizon League, even though we're not a name to defend it, because we obviously have men's, women's basketball student athletes. So you can imagine I've updated my presidents and athletic directors on this monthly, almost now weekly, relative to the potential risk and exposure this could mean for us. That ties into the NIL space. What's really driving at, though, Gary, is I believe we're seeing these contracts being negotiated, huge media contracts, and there's still not a guarantee of revenue share. And there's also a companion court case claiming NIL isn't just about back pay, but they should be paid for their name, image, likeness as part of a media contract. So the clip files are suggesting that negotiations are underway to settle that House case that would also include a percentage revenue share of some of these huge media contracts, whether it's the college football playoff, perhaps the new NCAA media contract. And I think that that's somehow achieving a revenue share without full-on triggering employee status is key. And the only way that can get done is through Congress. And I believe Congress recognizes, look, we've got 500,000 student athletes. We're really talking about a small minority here that are truly deserving of this huge revenue share.
Right.
And we don't want to somehow declare all 500,000 employees and make many of those opportunities go away, because it just doesn't make financial sense to categorize like Horizon League student athletes as employees. Our schools couldn't literally afford it. So with all that as context, where is it going? I think it's going to a settlement of the House case that will open the door for a revenue share, and then hopefully accelerate conversations with Congress. This is my crystal ball here, which is still fogging, to allow that revenue share to happen without tripping employee status, and then putting and that's just the revenue share from the media contracts, but putting some guardrails around NIL, because I think what we've seen is it's gotten exploited. Some student athletes are getting exploited based on who's negotiating those contracts for them. Mm-hmm. But on the other hand, we need some disclosures around it so that it's legit and not just veiled pay for play.
Very complex indeed, with much more to come on that, and much more to come with Julie Roe Lach coming up after the break. We'll talk about her path to the Horizon League and a lot more when the Business and Beyond podcast returns.
At PNC Bank, we're committed to making a difference in the lives of our customers and communities by helping them move forward financially. As a Main Street bank, we try to do right by our customers with every encounter. Our local teams offer personalized financial advice to help guide you in making the best decision. We're proud to be part of your community. PNC Bank. See how we can make a difference for you at pnc.com. Copyright 2022, the PNC Financial Services Group, Inc., all rights reserved.
Welcome back to the Business and Beyond podcast presented by PNC. My guest this week is a very busy lady in a very competitive and ever-changing landscape, collegiate athletics, the commissioner of the Horizon League based here in Indianapolis, Julie Roe Lach. And Julie, let's talk a little bit about you and your path to the Horizon League. Start way back. Where did you grow up?
I grew up in Southern Illinois, a small town called Pinckneyville, very much a coal mining and farming community.
Okay.
About 3,000 people.
Wow. Okay. Describe that. What was growing up like there?
Well, not a lot to do, as you can expect. But I think the gym was open 24 hours a day. That might be an exaggeration, but it was open early and shut down late. So I was definitely a kid who spent a ton of time at the gym. Not a lot else to do. And I mean, some of my favorite memories growing up was riding my bike to the gym and just playing pickup basketball and it was the whole gamut of kids like me to guys in their 50s and 60s. It was usually men or boys. My dad would always come out at some point on Sunday afternoons and join me, and we'd get in the truck to leave, and he'd say a bunch of has-beens and never-weres, and I'm not sure which ones we are. He said, well, I'm going someplace, but just great. It's where I really learned to love the game.
Yeah, I don't want to get too deep with it. Do you think that still happens there? Because I think of, I grew up same thing. You're playing baseball, basketball, pickup games, and they don't seem, certainly in baseball. I mean, you never see kids playing baseball anymore out in a field or in a neighborhood. Do you think that kind of environment still exists in this environment with social media and all the things we have going on?
No. And it's unfortunate. My husband grew up, he's an Indianapolis native on the west side. And he talks about same deal, always playing pickup at this neighborhood court, and that, the lessons learned. Yeah. And it's just the team aspect of it, but also you got to work through conflict when you want to call a foul. But as my dad used to tell me, if there's no blood, there's no foul. Like you can't
Right.
call fouls in pickup. But the whole point of it was, and we see it today, like we've over-organized ourselves. I don't have a solution, and I'm part of the problem right now with two kids playing travel ball.
Yeah.
It is, they love to play, and we'll go out in the driveway and play with them. And that's probably the closest they get to pickup, to the point I've said, hey, let's invite so-and-so over to play. Yeah. And they're like, well, we don't want to just play with them. I'm like, well, that's how you learn the game.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
We've lost that. And I do think somehow as a country, because to me, when you lose yourself in sport, whatever the sport it is, that's where you've got your passion. Or you lose your sport in the arts. Like that's how people find their passion, is you're doing an activity and you lose track of time. To me, it's that simple. And how do we give that to kids to where, the street lights are coming on, we got to head home, right. That's I think what we've got to get back to somehow.
Yeah, certainly girls athletics have evolved over time. To today, as you reflect back on the opportunities you had when you were young and getting into high school, what were those opportunities like?
I'll give my small town a lot of credit, because we had the recreation softball league, little leagues. We had the basketball junior pro, and through our school system, it was track, it was volleyball. I mean, essentially you could do every sport all season long. And it wasn't just that there wasn't pressure. There really wasn't opportunity to specialize. Just some kids were better at sports than others, or they practiced in the off season more than others.
Yeah, right.
And I also, we've talked about this in the college athletics space because of the overuse injuries that we're seeing. And you see that with your athletics trainers and all the data. When you are playing across sports like that and you're working different muscle groups, it seems intuitive, but it makes sense. You don't have overuse injuries because you're using different muscle groups based on the sport you're playing. So there's so many advantages to the diversity of sport. We tried with our kids to push them into different sports, and they did it for a while, and then eventually they just get to a place they want to specialize. And it's hard to walk that line.
Yeah. Well, you were a very good player, obviously, went to Millikan University, and I think you were an All-American, right?
I wasn't All-American, but more importantly, I was on a team, just a fantastic team. There were three of us who played together all 4 years. I'm still friends with both women, and our team made it to the NCAA Sweet 16 all 4 years, conference champs, and the Elite Eight 2 years.
Wow.
Our coach had built something before we got there and won a national championship after we left. It's fun to win, Gary, and we were able to do that.
That is very cool. What as you reflect back, because obviously the lessons learned from athletics are substantial and can be used obviously in business and life and all those kinds of things. What did you take away, beyond the on-court stuff? What did you take away? What did athletics teach you at the intercollegiate level?
Yeah, I have tried to really capture that in different ways, and it's hard to. I think one is my coach was really just like the source of inspiration, and every season she would have some sort of mantra and weave that into her pre-practice or post-practice comments, and then certainly pre-game speeches or post-game. And one year it was all about this season is a journey, not a destination. And that was my senior year, and we were gunning for, the Final Four. So I didn't agree with what she was saying because I was focused on the destination of getting our team there. And then obviously later in life, you really start to realize, no, it is about the journey. I mean, yes, we care about where we're going, but if you lose sight of the moments in front of you, whether it's personally or professionally, you miss it. But the other big one was, and I've seen this a lot in my work, she said, we are ordinary people coming together to do something extraordinary. And I say that with my team here in the Horizon League, we all, I mean, and you don't want to call yourself ordinary, but we're regular, hardworking people. We can come together and be extraordinary because of all the different talents that we bring. Just like a team, you've got the point guard, the guard, the forward, the shooting guard. You all bring different talents, and that becomes extraordinary. And in a work setting, you've got your communications, your PR, your legal. Like, how do you bring all that together to be extraordinary? So I really viewed it as a leadership lab that just translates. I mean, I think it's unlimited, the lessons you learn in sports and how you can take that with you.
Yeah. How did you get on the sports administration, sports management, that track? Was that what you always wanted to do?
I didn't even know it was a career choice. So it was really a fluke. My coach knew I wanted to go to law school. She literally handed me a scholarship application, an NCAA postgraduate scholarship application. Underneath it was an NCAA internship application that she didn't even know was part of the packet. Yeah. So I'm looking at both, and I see this NCAA internship in the national office, then in Kansas City before we moved here to Indy.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
And I applied and I was selected. I got to fly to Kansas City, interview, and I was like, this is where I want to be. Holy cow. These people work in college sports every day. I was fortunate enough to be selected, and I stayed there for 15 years, got my law degree here at IU McKinney at night. And that's how I was still able to figure out how to shape my passion for the law with sport.
That's great. Talk about the experience at the NCAA. What was that like?
It was really incredible. In Kansas City, there were just 300 of us. I say just. And by the time I left the NCAA 15 years later, we'd moved to Indianapolis. The staff was over 500 people, a couple different presidents. When I started, Sid Dempsey was the president. Then Miles Brand was named. Miles was terrific at really setting a vision for academics being at the core, and created some pieces that are still a legacy today at maintaining athletics and incentivizing and rewarding it. And through that, I really learned that to me was what a visionary leader can do in a huge association. But my different tracks there, I worked in eligibility essentially as like a judge of eligibility cases. That was tough because as a former student athlete, those decisions weighed on you, but yet we had such high volume. You had to be fair and consistent and quick. And then I investigated major infractions, traveled the country. Then I supervised a team doing that. That's probably a whole nother podcast of some stories, but I went toe to toe with some head coaches and And often they're attorneys that weren't always the most collegial. And then
Yeah. Yeah.
as both the investigator and then the prosecutor, we wore both hats. So you saw a case through completion. So really got a lot of experience through that process. Eventually was vice president of enforcement, and then left and started my own practice and joined Churchill and Antrim. And now we've built up a national sports law practice there where I'm advisor. And then now I'm going on 10 years here with the Horizon League. So
Wow.
the conference office is the right spot for me, I can tell you, because you get to interact with the student athletes, the athletics directors. I love traveling to campuses, being at championships, and then really you feel like you can help them affect change.
I got to ask you, what it was like in that enforcement area for the NCAA? I can't imagine what that would be like. I mean, what was it like? I mean, that's a pretty tough job, I would think.
It was very tough. And, some cases were self-reported by schools. And I became friends with a lot of folks in compliance offices on campus and attorneys representing those schools. And even coaches, some who I investigated, I've stayed in touch with because I was always fair. I just was tough. And I wasn't going to let things slide that didn't make sense, obviously. But I also held them accountable. And that would come through in the charging phase. But it was very difficult because, as I said, like we would often be with people at their worst professional moment, which is not really where you want to be. For me, day in and day out, it was necessary, I thought, and it still is a necessary regulatory piece of the NCAA. It's definitely not for everyone or for everyone forever. And for me, I was glad I did it. Felt like I made a positive impact, and then it was time to move on.
Yeah, with all the changes, as we've talked about, NIL, transfer portal, a lot of talk about people, or a lot of talk from people who suggest the NCAA is going to go away. Do you think that's going to happen?
I don't, and I think it's a couple of reasons. One, the NCAA hosts 90 championships a year, And that is important. Like, could that go away? I suppose we could just end the season with conference championships. But boy, that would be disappointing to so many student athletes. They want to take their talents, not just show that they are strong in conference, but that they can compete regionally or nationally. So, and that's at every level. So I think that championship function is critical. I do think there's a regulatory function there. It's becoming less important because we've just had to deregulate so many rules. The courts just are saying you can't regulate that, and you can't regulate transfers, and you got to really limit the financial aspect of what you regulate. So a lot fewer rules, but you still need some form of regulatory function to manage the rules you do have. I think those two pieces will stay. And finally, right now, if the NCAA goes away, then the question is, well, then who's going to do just those two huge functions? The NCAA also is managing I think it's well over 500 legal cases. And so if there's a new entity that is established, they're going to have to manage that litigation, which I'll tell you is overwhelming. And that's why this notion of, the Power 4, Power 5 are going to break away. Why would they break away and have to take all that litigation with them?
Right.
I don't see it happening.
Yeah. Final question for you, Julie. As you look ahead, what's next for the remainder of, as you look at 2024 into 25 for the Horizon League and what you'd like to accomplish?
Yeah, we are. First, I'll go back to Coach Campy's point from a basketball strategy. We want to build on this incredible momentum with both our men's and women's basketball programs across the league, because what we're seeing is, and we saw this with Oakland, the impact across the institution is so positive. As I said, Oakland had a 2-hour commercial on CBS that night when they played Kentucky. And it has continued to raise the profile of that institution and others. So how can we help our institutions with that piece of it in terms of continuing to invest in basketball while also raising up all their programs? I think the other big piece is, one, helping our schools manage this incredibly dynamic landscape, whether it's the external threats of congressional change, the legal threats of court cases, either federal or state, but still staying true to who we are. And part of that is ensuring the student athlete experience. We've done a lot in the mental health space, in the inclusion space, and really lifting up Coach John McClendon, who is a pioneer, and you all have helped us cover him during our championship. But how do we continue to use sport as a platform to, I think, remind people of what our values are and how we can use this platform, as I said, to keep being that leadership lab for our student athletes to be ready to take on the next big issue.
Julie Roe Lach, the commissioner of the Horizon League. Julie, thank you for taking the time to join us. It's been a fascinating conversation. Thanks for all you do for not only student athletes, but for Indianapolis as well. And I hope to see you soon. Thank you very much. I appreciate it. And the entire IBJ team. All right. And thank you for joining us on this episode of the Business and Beyond podcast. We're a weekly conversation with achievers in business, sports, entertainment, and beyond. And you can download all of our episodes and also get Indiana business news 24/7. All you have to do is go to InsideIndianaBusiness.com. I'm Gary Dick. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you next time.